Have you ever read a book that is so strange, so bizarre, and so incomprehensible that when you completed reading it, when you closed the covers, you simply sat there in stunned silence, wondering what in the hell did I just read? Because I have. And if you have not, allow me to introduce you to A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay. This is the weirdest book I have ever read in my life. I have been I had been familiar with this book for some time. It is regarded as kind of the preeminent or kind of the premier underground novel of the 20th century. David Lindsay did not make much as a writer. His writing was not very well known, even within his own lifetime, and it has not great. His reputation has not greatly grown much in the intervening years. But this book has gained a following. It is a cult novel. It has gained a cult following and was admired by um, numerous high profile figures, high profile writers, including J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and even Clive Barker. All of them have praised this book highly. Once again, it is not very well known. It is something of a secret, but then again, that's why it is the premier underground novel of the 20th century. It never broke through into the mainstream. It did not sell hardly any copies, I don't think, but it nonetheless has gained a small but devoted following. I read somewhere that David Lindsay, who was apparently um, quite upfront with his own um, standing as a writer. I read somewhere that he once said that he would never be a bestseller, but that at least one person would read his work every year until the end of time. Well, I guess I may be that one person this year because I read this book. I read A Voyage to Arcturus. And please bear with me. I'm going to ask you that right now. Bear with me as I try to formulate some kind of coherent statement, some kind of coherent commentary um, about this book because this is the weirdest book I have ever read in my life. It's crazy. This is a truly batshit crazy book, but in a good way, or mostly in a good way. A Voyage to Arcturus is a philosophical science fiction novel, emphasis on the philosophical. Philosophy is very much what this book is about. Although I will say that it does actually succeed fairly well as a science fiction novel. Uh, it's weird. I can't state that enough. It is a weird book. It is a book that is so inscrutable that after reading it, this is the only book, okay, this is the only book that I have ever read where when I finished it, when I closed the covers, I had no idea what I had just read. I had no idea what the meaning of the book was. There towards the end, I had no idea what was even happening. This book is insane. This is absolutely the most insane thing I have ever read. Um, so please, once again, bear with me as I try to formulate some kind of commentary upon this book, because it's hard to comment upon something which you don't even understand. And I don't know that anybody out there actually does understand this book. This book is an acid trip of a book. There are passages in this book which are just, I really, if I didn't know better, and actually I don't know better, so maybe I'm not remiss in wondering whether David Lindsay just dropped some acid or did some, you know, angel dust or something and just sat down and wrote this book, because once again, I have no idea what this even means. This is this is right up there with the Voynich manuscript. This is right up there with the Voynich manuscript. I have no idea what this book means, and this is the only experience of this kind that I have ever had in my time as a reader. A Voyage to Arcturus is not my favorite book of all time, but it is the only book that I've ever read and just had no idea what the hell it even meant. But I'm going to try to formulate some kind of something to say about this book, because this book is so underrated. It is so unknown, and that is tragically so, because it is, I think, actually a good book. Then I want to just shine a light on this book, get a little, get it out there to anyone who may ever see this video. This might be a book that you might be interested in checking out, because it is, if nothing else, interesting. I can definitely say that. It held my interest all the way through. Uh, Again, I have no idea what it means. I don't know that David Lindsay had any idea what it meant, but I think it is actually a pretty good book. It is either a document written by a man who was privy to some of the most profound cosmic metaphysical revelations ever known to any human mind, or it is the ramblings of a madman. I will leave that up to everyone who reads this book to decide, but it is either metaphysical revelation or crazy man at a keyboard. Don't know. It's weird, but let's get into it. So, what is A Voyage to Arcturus about? Um, well, it's about a man named Maskell. The names in this book are weird as crap. This guy named Maskell shows up somewhere, I guess, in England. I want to say this takes place somewhere. Only, only a very brief section at the beginning of this book actually takes place on Earth. But I want to say it takes place in that section, it takes place in England somewhere. And this guy, Maskell, shows up at a seance hosted by some people who don't matter, with a guy named Nightspore. Is Maskell and Nightspore their first names, their last names? We don't know. Anyway, so there's this medium guy at the seance, and he makes some kind of apparition appear, and then this guy named Crag, again, we don't know whether Crag is his first name or his last name, shows up, and he kills this apparition thing, and then he tells Maskell that he can take him across the universe. He tells Maskell that he can take him across the universe to a planet called Tormance, which orbits the star Arcturus, which Arcturus is actually a real star, although in this book it is a uh, double star system. It is actually two stars orbiting each other, whereas in real life, Arcturus is just a single star. So Maskell's like, cool, let's go to Tormance across the universe. Don't know why. He's just so agreeable to this prospect, but he is. So, wouldn't you know it, they board a crystal spaceship and rocket their way across the universe to Tormance. Um, on Tormance, Maskell wakes up alone and learns that he now has some new organs. Namely, Maskell has an eye thing in the middle of his forehead and a big ass tentacle growing out of his chest. Mind you, these different organs change at numerous times throughout this story. The tentacle eventually becomes a third arm growing out of his chest. The eye thing turns into various things. But anyway, Maskell wakes up with some weird organs growing out of some new organs growing out of his body, and then he just sets out in pursuit of this entity known as Surtur, also known as Shaping, also known as Crystal Man, also known as a lot of other names. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this entire plot, mainly because I don't even know what happens at certain parts of it, but it's enough to say that this plot is just, it's a quest. It is a quest, a voyage to Arcturus is a quest story, not unlike the Lord of the Rings. It is a quest in search of, for lack of a better word, God, as represented on this planet by the being known as Shaping or Crystal Man. Yes, these names are weird. Once again, this is a weird book with weird words and weird names. Um, Maskell is trying to find Shaping, the creator of this world. Um, why, it's never really clear, but he needs to locate this guy. And that is pretty much the gist, the broad strokes of the plot. It's just a journey in search of something, or in this case, someone. The closest thing that I can liken this book to, and I am all but certain that David Lindsay modeled this book on this work, and that is John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. This book is A Voyage to Arcturus is very, very, very reminiscent of The Pilgrim's Progress. It is not so much a Christian work, although it's odd that J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, both devout Christians, really connected with this book, because it's not really a Christian book so much as it is a Gnostic book. This is a Gnostic book among many other things. This is a Gnostic Pilgrim's Progress, if you will. Anyway, Maskell traverses large swaths of Tormance in search of Shaping. He meets various characters in the course of his travels, who discuss different philosophical outlooks with him. This book is not so much advertising one particular philosophy as it is trying to explore many different philosophies. Maskell encounters these different characters, they talk philosophy, and then usually things end kind of violently with someone dying. And this repeats numerous times until eventually, well, the end happens, and I can't. Don't worry about this book being spoiled, because I have not one idea what happens at the end of this book. I don't have a clue what happens at the end of this book. It literally got so psychedelic that I was reading the words, but the words had no meaning. It was that bizarre and outlandish. But anyway, at its core, this book is just an exploration of different philosophical outlooks, uh, structured in a manner that is reminiscent of John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. Uh, I believe relatively early on, I came across this book's thesis statement. The statement in this book, the passage or an excerpt out of this book, which best summarizes what the entire book is about. And it goes as follows. I understand you, or rather, I don't, but it doesn't matter. That one line pretty much sums up this entire book. That one line right there pretty much summarizes this entire reading experience. I understand you, or rather, I don't, but it doesn't matter. That pretty much is this book. You're not going to understand this. Again, I don't even think David Lindsay understood this book, and he wrote it. You're not going to understand it. But that is not to say that it's a bad book. And that's not to say that you can't get anything out of it. This book is deep. It is very deep, and it is very willing to engage with different outlooks on life, different ways of viewing things. But at the end of the day, it's not a book that I don't think can ever truly be understood. Um, Not on a plot, certainly not on a plot level, because the plot is incomprehensible. But more so, but not even also on a subtextual level. I don't think this book has a true message behind it. This book is not trying to promote any one particular message, I believe, so much as it is just try to explore different viewpoints, different perspectives. It is once again very Gnostic at its heart. It is very Gnostic. If you don't know what Gnosticism is, it was originally, I talked about Gnosticism actually in my review of Moby Dick, because that also is a deeply Gnostic book. Ironically, it's ironic that I read two Gnostic books almost back to back, but Gnosticism was at its most basic level. Gnosticism was an offshoot of early Christianity, which posited the existence of a larger and more powerful and more virtuous deity that existed beyond the deity which we know as God, and it posited that reality is an illusion which must be transcended in order to achieve salvation, I guess, or something like that. Again, you can look up Gnosticism on your own if you want to know what it is, but it was an it was an offshoot of early Christianity. Uh, and this book is a deeply Gnostic book, as evinced in the following passage. Maskell in this scene is talking about, well, as he always does, he's talking philosophy with another character, and he says this right here. This world of yours, and perhaps of mine too, for that matter, doesn't give me the slightest impression of a dream or an illusion or anything of that sort. I know it's really here at this moment, and it's exactly as we're seeing it, you and I. Yet it's false. Side by side with it, another world exists. And that other world is the true one. And this one is all false and deceitful to the very core. And so it occurs to me that reality and falseness are two words for the same thing. Yeah, this book, once again, this is a book that is very concerned with Gnosticism. It's a very Gnostic book. Reality is an illusion. Maskell is pursuing the literal creator of torments, this world which he is on. Um, but that creator is not the ultimate deity. Maskell is pursuing the being that created this world and created the life on this world, but it is very clear that that being is probably not the ultimate being. No matter how mighty that being may seem, the book makes it pretty clear that there is something beyond even shaping, beyond even crystal man. Um, this book is more than just a Gnostic book, though. It is more than just a Gnostic book. Gnosticism is only one system of belief which this book explores. It tries to tackle a lot. I've never read a book, and this is not a long book. My edition of this book is only 135 pages. Um, very big pages with very small print, but it remains that this is not a long book. But this book tries to explore a lot. It tries to explore so many different perspectives, so many different philosophical viewpoints, which mirror different religions or different systems of belief in our real world. In this book, it's not something that everybody's going to enjoy, but it is something that really did swing for the fences, I believe. And I can really give it credit for that. If nothing else, I can give it credit for its ambition because it tried to do a lot. Um, just among the myriad metaphysical and cosmic matters which this book deals with, um, there was one passage which um, really struck me as, I'm willing to bet, pretty original for its time. This book was written in, I want to say, the 1920s, very early 19th century. So this book is about 100 years old, or somewhere thereabouts at the time of this video's recording. But it did have a certain passage in it which I thought was probably pretty original for its time, and it is as follows. In this scene, Maskell is interacting with another character who he crosses paths with in this book, and this character is um, expounding to him the basis of his belief in this deity known as Faceny. And he says this passage right here. Faceny is of this nature. He faces nothingness in all directions. He has no back and no sides, but is all face, hence why he is called Faceny. And this face is his shape. It must necessarily be so, for nothing else can exist between him and nothingness. His face is all eyes, for he eternally contemplates nothingness. Thoughts flow perpetually from Faceny's face backward. Since his face is on all sides, however, they flow into his interior. A draught of thought thus continuously flows from nothingness to the inside of Faceny, which is the world. The thoughts become shapes and people the world. This outer world, therefore, which is lying all around us, is not outside at all as it happens, but inside. The visible universe is like a gigantic stomach, and the real outside of the world we shall never see. This is an intriguing passage. this is a very, very, uh, again, I think this is a very, very original concept. I'm not going to say that this is true. I don't know whether again, this book covers so much ground, it covers so much philosophical and metaphysical territory that I don't think it's necessarily promoting any one outlook or any one view over another so much as it is just exploring different things. But this passage really struck me because I don't know if there is any real I'm sure there may be, but I don't know personally of any precedent um, before this right here, this concept that Lindsay is putting forth, which is basically that everything that exists is just a mote, if you will, in God's eye. That everything that exists is just a thought of God, or in this case, Faceny. Um, if you want to really psych yourself out, you can check out some of the uh, concepts, some of the theories which have been relatively recently put forth by Vitaly Van Churin. He is a physicist, I want to say, at a university, which I can't remember right now. But anyway, when I read this passage, it really struck me because it struck me as being similar to some of the theories which have been put forth by Vitaly Van Churin, which state that neural networks are the underlying structure of everything in existence, very much like the structure of a brain. If you look at a human brain, and then if you zoom outward on some of the images that we have of the universe, such as have been relayed to us by, like the one of the telescopes that they've shot into, one of the satellites that they've shot into space that are traveling billions of miles away. If you zoom out on those pictures, you kind of get struck by the similarities that the images present with neural tissue and the synapses of a brain. And so it really does just kind of make you wonder at times whether everything kind of is just one big brain. And again, this is some really far out fringe kind of thinking, but it does merit consideration, I think. And this passage right here struck me as being very forward thinking because it did ring a bell with some of the theories that Vitaly Van Churin has postulated relatively recently about neural networks being the underlying fabric of everything. And it kind of would seem that way, considering that the universe outwardly kind of resembles neural tissue, which you might find in a brain. So it's just kind of, neat food for thought. And I think that is what um, uh, A Voyage to Arcturus is all about. But I just want to reiterate once again that A Voyage to Arcturus is probably not going to be a book for everybody. Uh, there were some things that I can see being rather off-putting about it, or at least could be. It was a book that was. It is a book that could be construed as being somewhat sexist, uh, because it was a book that was very concerned with gender and sex. Uh, I don't mean that the book is sexist in like the conventional way that you think of sexism, which is, asserting that one gender is inferior in some respects to the other gender. But it can be construed as sexist in a different way because it is very concerned with the concepts of masculine versus feminine. But to its credit, to this book's credit, it doesn't adhere to one outlook. It explores the concepts of masculinity and femininity across a very wide spectrum. When Maskell lands on Torments, initially he is hosted by a couple named Joywind and Panawe. They are a husband and wife couple that really kind of exemplify a very egalitarian view of marriage and a very kind of the ideal of what I think everybody would like. They're very even. They love each other deeply. Love is the foundation. Neither one of them is in any kind of authority over the other. It's very egalitarian, and I think it is really, again, it is a religious book, not necessarily Christian, but it does contain certain elements of Christianity, and I think it's kind of like, um, well, again, it's very reminiscent of the Pilgrim's Progress, but as Maskell journeys across Torments, the relations between genders, between men and women, are explored in varying ways, but it never actually promotes one thing over another. And that is the book's saving grace because I can see a lot of modern readers being somewhat off put by this. Not, again, the book never says anything. It's not like women are stupid, get back in the kitchen or anything like that. It's not anything like that. It's just makes certain assumptions about certain characteristics being prevalent in one gender over another. It's very much of the mindset that that femininity is linked with love and self-sacrifice and nature, uh, whereas masculinity is more concerned with uh, danger and assertion and stuff like that. Again, it's not anything that I think that's just going to make you just burn the book or throw it against a wall. But some of the things that you might read in it are probably going to come across as a little bit outdated. They probably are a little bit outdated because I think I don't think that it's a good idea to link characteristics with a certain gender. Certain things, I guess you can, uh, but I guess you're treading thin ice whenever you do this, especially in today's world, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's not a good idea to shoehorn people into being certain things based on what gender they are because that's people don't generally like to be people don't generally like other people to make the assumptions that they are going to be a certain thing based because they are a man or a woman. It's again, David Lindsay is not. It's not. This is not at all some kind of misogynistic treatise or anything like that. It's not. It is very open to exploration and it is very open to new ideas. But at the same time, I can totally understand some people being kind of off put by some of the things that they may read in it because it is a little bit outdated. Um, it is kind of, well, you know what? Just read the book. If you want to understand what I'm talking about, read the book. It's very concerned with notions of femininity versus masculinity and the way that these things dominate people's character or something. But then again, you meet characters in the book that exhibit different traits that are not gender specific. I mean, heck, you meet characters in this book that are neither male or female. So, I mean, it's very open to exploration and it's very open to questioning, and that is no saving grace of this book. It is its redeeming quality is that asserts it never asserts this is the right thing, you have to believe this. It's not like that at all. It's very just exploratory. But again, some of this stuff is definitely a little bit outdated, probably. But it is still kind of intriguing to read about. And it's never anything that I think you're gonna feel. It is never anything that I think you're going to feel insulted when you're reading it, if you are a man or a woman or whatever. Uh, but it is very concerned with concepts of love, and it did have this quote in the book that I just included here because I thought it was kind of sweet. Love can't go back, it can only go on. Um, that's probably one of the lesser, that's probably one of the least philosophical things that this book deals with, but I just included this quote here because I just thought it was kind of sweet. It was kind of quaint. Love can't go back, it can only go on. Again, uh, read this book. I'm going to recommend this book. Read this book. It is a remarkably striking book. It is a remarkably unique book. It is a book to which I cannot compare it. It is a book which I cannot compare to any other thing except maybe The Pilgrim's Progress. It is very reminiscent of The Pilgrim's Progress, but only superficially. Uh, the ending, the ending to A Voyage to Arcturus is probably the most inscrutable thing I've ever read. Once again, I'm not going to spoil the ending to this book for you because I cannot. It is beyond my capability to spoil the ending to this book because I don't even know what happens at the end of this book. I hope that this video might I hope that this video might inspire others out there to pick this book up. It is free to read. I believe it is well within the public domain at this point. I believe you can probably find this on the internet if you want to read pro bono. But it's enough to say that at the end of this book, it gets cosmic to the extreme. I have never encountered a book that got quite so cosmic, quite so grand in scale and grand in scope as A Voyage to Arcturus did at its ending. It got even weirder than it had been up until that point, and it was the weirdest book I'd ever read uh, up until that point from the get-go. Uh, but the ending to the book is where David Lindsay really lays it out there in terms of his cosmology, if you will. And again, I don't really know how much of this book you're supposed to take as being, actually believable, or how much of this David Lindsay actually believed himself. I don't know. I'm kind of scared to know. I don't really know that I want to know because if David Lindsay actually believed what he wrote down in this book, it's amazing to me that he was not locked up in an asylum because this book is truly insane. And the ending is absolutely the most insane part of it. It's just I don't even know what happened. I was reading the words, but the words meant nothing because again, I can't even describe the experience of reading the climax of this book, reading the ending of it. It was so insane, so incomprehensible, but yet it was like there was some meaning that was just right there, just right beyond your grasp, like some elusive significance, some elusive meaning that you just couldn't quite get to, but it was almost there. And so I may read this book again because uh, I certainly did not understand all of it. I didn't even understand a little bit of this book. A Voyage to Arcturus is the most inscrutable and incomprehensible thing I've ever read. And so I think it does, for that reason alone, merit some serious revisiting in the future. And I think this line right here really summed up the ending of the book because this line came at the end of the book. Maskell says, "You are speaking in riddles and I don't understand you." You and me both, buddy. You and me both, because this line right here really did sum up all my all my sentiments, all my emotions, all my feelings regarding the culmination of the book. They were all summed up by this one line right here. You are speaking in riddles and I don't understand you. Uh, yeah, that pretty much is this book. But what more can I say about A Voyage to Arcturus? I guess I could say quite a bit, but at the end of the day, I guess I would be truly saying very little because it's hard to say anything. It's hard to say anything meaningful about something that you don't even understand. And I didn't understand hardly a lick of A Voyage to Arcturus. I didn't hardly understand anything of it. Um, but it was a very well written book. It was a book which contained writing which I was not averse to. I was very much a fan of the writing in A Voyage to Arcturus. It was written very clearly, very in a very straightforward manner, but it was also quite poetic and quite beautiful to read at times. And there were some seriously striking passages in the book, which made it really worth it to read. I was very much pleasantly surprised by the quality of the writing in this book. It was a very well written book, I thought. But at the end of the day, once again, to say anything. It's hard to say anything meaningful about something that you don't understand. And I didn't understand A Voyage to Arcturus. I didn't even understand a little of A Voyage to Arcturus. It is a book that I don't think anybody understands. I don't even know that David Lindsay understood it. It is truly the most psychedelic and inscrutable book that I have ever read. But I kind of liked it. Like, I'm not going to say that I loved this book. I didn't really love it, but I definitely liked it. If I had to rate, you know what? I don't even know that I could rate this book. Maybe a B, maybe a B. There's really not much in the way of character development. Uh, but the writing is good and it definitely contains some big ideas. So, is it literary to me? You bet your ass this book is literary. This book is literary to the max in terms of its thematic content, and the writing was very good. Um, again, I'm just rambling at this point, but what I wanted to do with this video is shine a light on A Voyage to Arcturus because it is a book that is so unknown and so overlooked, and it's just a book that not very many people out there are aware of, but that so many people out there might enjoy reading. And so, for that reason, I wanted to do a video spotlighting it because I think it is a very good book and I think it merits reading. And so, for that reason, I'm going to recommend A Voyage to Arcturus. Have you read A Voyage to Arcturus? Anybody out there? If you have, I'm betting most of you probably haven't, but if you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you haven't read A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay, you might want to check it out. It's a book that a lot of people out there might enjoy. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.